everybody, welcome into another edition of the Shelby County High School Football Show and a special semifinal edition here as we get you geared up for this week's battle between the Thompson Warriors and Hoover Buccaneers as they head to the semifinals of the Class 7A playoffs and the sixth year in a row that these two teams are going to meet in this exact same situation with the spot to the state championship on the line. And for the Thompson Warriors, looking to make it to their fifth consecutive state championship game. Obviously, they've won 3 in a row, been to 4 in a row, now looking to make it to their 5th in a row and take 5 of these 6 semifinal battles with the Hoover Buccaneers. So a lot to touch on with this game. Obviously a rematch of a game that happened just a few weeks back, and we're going to talk about it all here in just a minute as we look ahead to that semifinal battle. Going to be a pretty short, simple, and sweet show, and not just because the temperatures dropped about 20 degrees from what it was a week ago, but because we've only got that one game to touch on. But before we do jump in to talk about that big matchup between those two teams, we've got to give a shout-out to the Pelham Panthers, Vincent Yellow Jackets, and Cornerstone Chargers, all three of those teams with tremendous seasons that came to an end last Friday night. The Pelham Panthers in the Class 6A playoffs, first year under head coach Mike Vickery. They fall short last week against St. Paul's. A long road trip south to Mobile, end up dropping that game. But this first year under Vickery, and the Pelham Panthers win a playoff game in week 1 of the playoffs for the first time since 2006. So things trending in the right direction there for the Pelham Panthers under their first-year head coach. We'll see if that continues to carry forward. Same situation for the Vincent Yellow Jackets, Lucas Weatherford, and what he's been able to build there for Vincent. Obviously not the ending they wanted as they fought a defending 2A state champion Clark County last week in a pretty tight game throughout. Just not enough late in the second half there for the Jackets on the offensive side of the football to keep pace in that game. But Vincent finishes the season with 10 wins for the first time in school history after that dramatic, exciting, and emotional first-round victory that they had against Laverne, 36-35. A couple of weeks ago. And for the Cornerstone Chargers, obviously the first year that they've had an 8-man region in the AISA, so Cornerstone jumps into that region and makes it to the semifinals of the AISA 8-man playoffs. They fall short to Springwood, a game that they won earlier in the season, but this time around just not enough offense there for the Cornerstone Chargers to have the success that they needed to jump into the state championship game. But a very young football team there, led by head coach James Lee, going to have a lot of talent coming back and a very realistic shot next year of taking it all the way. So for those three teams, kudos for a special season. It's exciting to see what the opportunities they've laid out for the future there at those three programs. But that brings us back around to this game and the opportunity ahead for the Thompson Warriors and Hoover Buccaneers this Friday night. That game going to take place out at the Hoover Met, not too far away, simply because Hoover won the region championship for the second year in a row a few weeks back, 9-0 over Thompson. So we've got a lot to touch on. We're going to jump right in. We're going to talk about that big game as one of these two teams going to be playing for a Class 7A state championship. It's almost like deja vu. Here we go again between these two teams in the Class 7A semifinals. The 6th consecutive year that these two teams are going to meet with a spot in the state championship on the line just shows the level of competitiveness, the experience, the coaching, the athletes, the talent that they have here at both of these programs to be able to reach this spot in the season for 6 consecutive years. And we both know the storied history that the Hoover Buccaneers have, one of the best programs in the state's history, obviously a dynasty for so long with the number of state championships that they were able to rack up. But here come the Thompson Warriors the last several years. Obviously have played for 4 consecutive state championships, won 3 in a row. This is a team that is ready to win a 4th title in a row now. The only thing standing in the way of them having that opportunity is their rival, the Hoover Buccaneers, a team that beat them a few weeks back 9-0. So you look at that, and that gives you enough of a storyline right there, right off the bat. But just breaking these two teams down, coming into this matchup specifically, when you look at what they've been able to do the last couple of weeks since that meeting, both had a bye week coming off of that matchup the first time around. head into the playoffs. The first round of the playoffs both looked extremely well. The Thompson Warriors pick up a 34-0 shutout win against Huntsville. 8th grade quarterback Trent Seaborn steps in 342 yards, 4 touchdowns in his first start of the postseason, first start of the season in general as an 8th grade quarterback in the 7A classification for a team that had won 3 state championships in a row. Impressive to see what he was able to do stepping in to that role. And then last week, they pick up a 21-12 win against Vestavia Hills. And it wasn't as easy rolling as it was the week before or as it was the first time around when Thompson met Vestavia Hills earlier in the season in a 34-14 victory in that game. The defense continued to play well. It continues to play well each week, has all season, should do the same thing again coming up this week. But last week, they did struggle at times stopping the run. John Paul Head, the quarterback of Vestavia Hills, had a lot of success running the football in that game, but Thompson eventually able to fill in those holes inside the front 7 and kind of ruin any running room that Head had throughout that second half of the football game, made some big tackles, and then forced them into throwing situations, and every time they stepped back to throw the football, well, there was the Thompson secondary. They had 3 interceptions that made the difference there in that second half to help the Warriors pick up a hard-fought 21-12 victory, a game that was 3-0 Vestavia at the halftime break. And then in the first drive of the second half, Thompson comes out, finally able to get some things going on the offensive side of the football, and they move it down the field, take a 7-3 lead. Vestavia right back with a field goal, 7-6 there early in the second half. And then we saw Thompson score again, make it 14-6. Vestavia come back with another answer, 14-12. They're unable to convert the 2-point conversion, and that was ultimately the difference in making this probably a little bit more of an exciting game down the stretch. But Vestavia Hills still had 2 opportunities with the ball to take the lead, never could convert, and that's because the Thompson defense, even with their backs against the wall late in that game, stepped up to make play after play, and eventually it ends with A.J. Green running in the insurance touchdown from about a yard out there in the final minute and a half for that 21-12 victory. So Thompson, they get into the semifinals of the playoffs with that hard-fought victory. The defense doing a lot of work last week. The run game of the offense starting to look like it should have in that game as well. So they go into this game looking for some revenge. As for the Hoover Buccaneers, they open with a dominant playoff victory in round 1. And then last week against Hewitt-Trussville, a team that they struggled with in the regular season, a very tightly contested game the first time around between those two. Well, Hoover's offense looked a lot better this time around. That game the first time around, neither team could reach the 20s. This time around, Hoover was able to take a 21-3 lead, ultimately goes on to win that game 28-11. And they gained a ton of confidence. In my opinion, on the offensive side, this is an offense that's really kind of improved each week since playing Thompson a few weeks back in a 9-0 victory where they only scored 7 offensive points. This offense the last 2 weeks has looked a little bit better moving forward, and there's been some different dynamic there at the quarterback position for the Buccaneers the last couple of weeks as well. Starting quarterback injured in that first matchup with Hoover, with Thompson. Then you step in with a freshman quarterback, a couple of young freshman quarterbacks who were able to make some plays with their legs, and that leads us into this game this week. We just saw Thompson's defense have to step up and stop a running quarterback. If you're Hoover coming into this game, that's what you've got to find that success doing, is where can you find some things in the ground game with the dynamic athletes that you have back there at the running back position and the quarterback position coming into this football game. And I think that's going to be an area of focus for Thompson's defense and for Hoover's offense coming into this matchup when you look at what these two teams are going to try to do. But just looking at them on paper right now, you've got a Thompson team scoring 27 points per game, and Hoover, they're scoring 29 points per game. So those two teams separated by just 2 points per game on the offensive side of the football. There's been some inconsistency at times from both of these offenses. Two offenses that have been scoring near 40-plus points per game the last few years, struggling a little bit more on that side of the ball this season, but they've got the defenses to make up for it. Hoover giving up 9.3 points per game On the defensive side of the football, obviously, the first time around in the meeting between these two teams, they gave Thompson their first shutout since the 2016 season. Last time Thompson was shut out before that came against Hoover back in 2016. So the Buccaneers step up, force a shutout that first time around between these two teams. But Thompson's defense only gave up 7 points in that game and really played better than even giving up those 7 points. The other 2 points in that 9-0 loss came from a safety by Thompson's offense there, ultimately making it a 2-score game down the stretch and too much for that offense to overcome. So you've got two defenses playing extremely well. Like I said, Hoover giving up 9.3, Thompson on paper giving up 12 points per game, but that includes those two games to start the season against Buford, against Lipscomb Academy. Those two teams both had 21 or more points off of special teams and pick sixes alone, or scoop and scores. So turnover, special teams were costly in those two games to start the season. When you truly break it down and look at what Thompson's defense has been able to do this season, giving up right about that same number, about 9.5 points per game on the defensive side of the football. So just playing tremendous. One of the best defenses in the country this season, and Hoover, they're right there alongside that with what they've been able to do so far this season as well. So that takes us into this matchup and what we can expect between these two matchups after looking at all that, or between these two teams after looking at all those numbers, breaking things down. And it quite simply comes down to, we know both defenses are very talented, and we know what they're going to bring to the table in this matchup. It's tough to see Thompson coming out here giving up more than 14, 17 points in this football game. So can the offense come out and extend that? Can the offense reach that 17, 20, 21 point mark on that side of the football? If Thompson's offense can come out, have success with the football, that's going to be their number one key. You know what your defense is going to give you. You know there's a great chance that they could hold Hoover to yet again 10 points or less in this matchup, possibly 14, maximum 17, but you know your defense is going to give you that chance to win this football game with how talented they are. So if you're Thompson's offense, you've got to have that goal in mind. If you're the offensive line, there's no bigger moment than right now to play your best game of the season. That's going to be the biggest key, in my opinion, coming into the game. And I get a little bit amped up talking about it because we saw the definition of it last week against Vestavia Hills. In that first half, Thompson had no first downs, struggling to move the ball, couldn't convert anything, and it's because they were setting themselves up in second and long situations. Eventually get to third down. They were mostly third and manageable, but couldn't get a couple of yards to get those first downs, and that's all simply based off of push up front and finding the seams from an offensive standpoint, and they just couldn't get it done, and Vestavia Hills capitalized. Vestavia Hills had 10 first downs in that first half. They held the ball for about 20 minutes of that first half. 20 of the 24 minutes in the first half, Vestavia Hills had the ball because Thompson wasn't able to get those first down. Then you put Vestavia Hills back on the field, and they were able to churn out some long drives that ate up the clock, and that's exactly what you want to do against this Thompson football team. Ultimately, Vestavia Hills couldn't convert those into points. They missed a field goal just before the half as time expired. Could have made that a 6-0 game at that point in time. And then in the second half, had other opportunities as well as they drove down the field a few times, but only able to get a field goal and one touchdown in the second half. Trailing 14-12, couldn't turn those into points either, with a couple of opportunities late in that football game. So the defense played well, but what changed in that second half from Thompson's offense is they were able to find those plays that extended the drives, that advanced them down the field. And you looked specifically the first drive of the second half, they came out, scripted it perfectly to start the second half, and they drove right down the field, and they score a touchdown, and they take that 7-3 lead early in the second half, and that gave them that little bit of confidence because the passing game wasn't on last week. It wasn't what it was the week before for Seaborn in the passing game, but the run game started to play better, started to play up to its expectations. A.J. Green and Michael Dujon both had big games in that one. with Green had 2 touchdowns. Dujon had 1 touchdown. So both of those guys played extremely well in that game with what they had to work with, and that's the fact that there wasn't much balance on the offensive side of the football. This week, the number one key, come out, set that kind of tone early in the football game, and your offensive line's got to have some push and got to create some holes for that run game, because you've got those 2 talented backs that can run the football. If they're able to get some consistency, set you up with 3-4 yard gains on first down, then that changes the entire outlook of this offense. It opens up so much more of what you're able to do, because you can sit there, you can throw slants, you can throw outs and try to set yourself up with early gains. But if you're not getting anything out of those and you're sitting in 2nd and 9, 2nd and 10, 2nd and 11, then you're all of a sudden, that drive's almost over at that point, because you're having to fight back already from the start of that first play. So the big thing, finding those holes, getting that 3-4 yards on first down, couple more on second down, and then you set yourself up in third and very manageable, and that's where the offensive line has to step up again. Protection for Seaborn if there's a pass, or open up and have that push backwards if you're going to run the football in a 3rd and short situation. But to me, that's the number one key for Thompson this week. It's not the offense that we've seen the last several years where they're going to be able to throw a 35, 40-yard pass downfield and score in 2, 3, 4, 5 plays every drive. It's going to be more methodical of an offense at this point for the Warriors, and Seaborn does have a big arm. We've already seen that, but when you don't have much balance on the offensive side, there's not much space out there. There's not much separation for the receivers. There's not much space for him to throw into. So you've got to have that balance, and you've got to open up more space for those receivers to have an opportunity to go up and make a big play down the field. And they've got to be able to create separation with their speed, which has also been a little bit of an issue at times so far this season. But to me, that's the number one key. Has Thompson's offense gotten where it needs to get for them to advance to the state championship game? I think Hoover's is about where it needs to be. They've still got some growing pains as well. They're going to have to be able to do some similar things. I think they need to focus heavily on running the football and trying to wear down Thompson, similar to what Vestavia Hills did a week ago. And then if you are going to throw the football, you've got to find the right moments to do it, and you've got to have the confidence to do it, because we saw that be an issue for Vestavia Hills last week, and it became costly. Honestly, almost cost Hoover the first time around in that game between these two teams, as the Buccaneers, every time that they stepped back to throw, found themselves in difficult situations and only scored 7 points in that game. So you look at that, you've got two offenses still trying to find exactly what their identity is going to be going into this matchup. One of them's going to find it this week, I think, and that's going to be the ultimate difference when it comes down to it, because this is going to be a very hard-fought, physical, defensive battle, and whichever team can make those plays in the second half. We saw it from Thompson last week. Hoover was able to create some separation the first 2 weeks, hasn't had to have that yet at this point in the season. This week, they're going to have that. This is going to be most likely a 1 or 2 possession game going into the fourth quarter, going into the second half. So which offense can come out, find what they need to have that success in the second half, in the clutch, make those clutch big-time plays in the biggest moment of the season. Ultimately, that makes the difference at the end of the night when you've got two talented physical defenses like we're going to see in this matchup. The other thing that you look at in this game is the motivation factor, and when you look at these two teams, it's pretty straightforward. Thompson, they've won 3 state championships in a row. They've won this semifinal battle 4 years in a row. They've dethroned Hoover to this point. Thompson's the new kings in the new kings in this state. They've got the dynasty now. They've won 3 in a row. They're looking to make it 4 in a row. For the Hoover Buccaneers, that's all you need to hear. You won the region championship last year. You lost in the semifinals of the 7A playoffs. You didn't get a chance to play for a state championship. So are you going to be settling for that happiness of winning a region title, or do you want more? Do you want to take back that crown here in the state in the 7A classification? That's plenty of motivation for them, even though they're sitting in good shape from the regular season and their first 2 rounds of the playoffs. As for the Thompson Warriors, you've lost 2 region championships in a row. This year you lose on your home field. You're shut out for the first time since 2016. Now you're looking to win a fourth state championship, and you're one game from having that opportunity. So you get a shot to take down the team that did shut you out, the team that did keep you from winning a region championship, and a team that's trying to keep you from winning the state championship for the fourth year in a row and for playing for your fifth consecutive state title. So when you look at that, that's all the motivation you need. They're the only thing standing in your way, and this is a team that doesn't want to be the one that takes that step back. They want to keep that standard of winning a state championship, and that all starts with a strong performance against Hoover this Friday night out at the Hoover Met. So for both of these teams, when they're out here, when they're practicing throughout this week, it's quite simple. You're thinking about that other team on the other side of town, what they're doing to be better than you, and then you one-up your game. There should be no lapse in mental preparedness for this game, no lapse in physical preparedness for this game. All week throughout practice, you have to be thinking the other team's working harder. We're not going to be outworked. We've got to outwork that other team. It's one of those things. I think motivation is a huge factor, and I think if you can go out in a game like this ready to wreak havoc, that could make all the difference in the world rather than playing nervous because of what's on the line. So we'll see which team shows up ready to play. It could be both of them, and they both could have those improvements on the offensive side of the football that we were talking about, each one needing. And then beyond that, the defenses that are going to be out there. It's just going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to see what we can expect from these games. If they both, or from these teams, if they both show up ready to play, prepared, focused, this is going to be a tremendous football game between these two teams with a spot in the state championship on the line. We'll see how it unfolds on Friday night out at the Hoover Met. Going to be a lot of fun between these two teams for the sixth year in a row battling for a spot in that state championship game. Well, that does it for this week's Shelby County High School football show, the special semifinal edition. We'll see you all on Friday night out at the Hoover Met for that big game. What's going to happen? How's it going to unfold? What kind of game are we going to have? It's going to be a lot of fun to break down. We'll have the pregame show live before the game out there at the Hoover Met. Then we'll obviously have all of our coverage on Twitter and the story and photos after. Will Thompson be able to advance to the state championship game yet again? Only one team stands in the way from them having a chance at a fourth consecutive state championship. We'll see what happens when they meet the Hoover Buccaneers.